Everybody. Lovely that you've joined us this afternoon. My name's Fiona McNay. I lead the team at Space Doctors within Humanate. And today I'd like to start with the idea that culture matters. And I hope to explain in the next 20 minutes or so why that's the case. Culture that your consumers live in every day is constantly changing and is often a blind spot in getting to some of the sort of meaningful understandings and opportunities that we want to glean from our consumer research. Unlocking, therefore, the hidden cultural context which influences your consumer community every day can be really important. And indeed, at Space Doctors, we use this quote quite a lot from Helen Edwards, that perhaps making a study of consumers without reference to culture is somewhat like making a study of fish without referencing the sea. The sea is the context within which the fish live. It influences their everyday. It's constantly changing. And similarly, culture is perhaps the biggest factor that influences what people think, feel, do, probably importantly, how people see themselves and how they then go on to make the choices, or why they go on to make the choices that they do. So it's a good idea to be understanding culture alongside your consumer work. And to be really insightful, we have to understand both the fish and the sea. Bringing consumer work, such as your communities, together with cultural insight gives you two different lenses which are very complementary. Consumer work goes to the consumer to elicit the ideas, the beliefs, the values and desires that they can express. Whereas cultural work sort of comes slightly from the other direction. Our start point is going out into the culture to identify the ingredients that will shape the ideas, the beliefs, the values, the desires of tomorrow. So understanding the influence on what our consumers are going to be telling us down the line. Knowing both of those things is a really powerful combination. And here's a case study just to give you a sense of how that can work sometimes. This was a study that we did on female light adult incontinence many years ago, so we can talk about it freely. The consumer research we did with both Qual and Quant, and the consumer work helped us get to the detailed needs and concerns and experiences of consumers around this condition. But they very clearly said that brands talking openly about this condition of light adult incontinence, that really should remain taboo for now. It made them feel uncomfortable and wasn't something that necessarily they would recommend or would want to see. But when we looked at the cultural insight that we did alongside the consumer work, and we analysed female-led content from TV shows and chat rooms, we revealed a sort of an emergent approach to the condition that really was feeling much more open and much more playful and much more shameless and much more sort of transparent, if you like, about this condition. And we saw on the edges of culture a new language developing. At the time, our client wanted to go forward with the consumer work. And so they created a piece of advertising that directly addressed the really good and really important insights from the consumer work, which was about protection and discretion. And both of those things were supported by some really good endorsements. And this was the kind of advertising that they came out with. Their key competitor, however, a little while later, about 18 months later, recognized the kind of cultural change that we had picked up and decided to act on it. And their campaign was this one. They used Whoopi Goldberg. They talked about, so here's an example. There's a 1 in 3 chance Cleopatra was hiding more than Mark Antony from Caesar. There's a 1 in 3 chance Helen of Troy was not entirely dry when she launched those 1,000 ships. It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's still about protection. It's still about discretion. It's still about all of the core consumer ideas that are the foundation. But the cultural context of this being a condition of femaleness over the years for eons past, bringing that into today with the humor of a character like Whoopi Goldberg, just brought forward a cultural relevance to this condition and decided to use what we saw in the emergent cultural context to take those consumer ideas to a different sort of level. And this became the #1 best performing ad in this category at that time. So it's just the difference that cultural insight can make. And that's what we do. Space Doctors within Humanate is a specialist cultural consultancy. And what we can help you do is understand what's influencing your consumers and their responses and why. We can help reveal some of those emerging cultural forces, perhaps those new languages coming through. They're going to shape the needs and behaviors of tomorrow. And we can help open up some transformational new thinking for your brand or category. That's the work we've been engaged with for many years. We were pioneers in cultural insight and its application to brand and business and research challenges, and have been a leading kind of exponent and innovator of those methodologies during that time. And we do that really across a network of cultural analysts and specialists working in over 40 markets around the world. And that neatly parallels the geographical reach of the Humanate brand and their offices in EMEA and APAC and the Americas. And now we also have a worldwide network of cultural change makers called our Illume Guides, the Illume Network. And they provide a leading edge perspective on tomorrow's consumer culture that sits alongside the work done by our expert cultural analysts and the work we do in cultural analytics, which helps us, track and quantify some of these cultural changes and the cultural context within which your community is operating. So how does this work in your community or with your community? Well, as we know, Humanate are the leaders in building highly bespoke and innovative communities, which will reveal the desires and the feelings and the needs of consumers. But we also know that that is all influenced by the changes around that consumer community. And those changes might be a cultural influence, which we will pick up by looking at macro trends, at popular culture shifts, the things that we can read through cultural analytics or on digital and social media. Or it might also be influenced by changes in the category in which you're working. So significant disruptions, for example, or new players arriving in the category, new meanings coming into play within that category's language. And we can also unlock those using some semiotic techniques. And that means we can bring those two influences to bear on your understanding of the community and draw out what we think is more valuable insights from your community. Because you see, the thing is, culture changes whether we do or not. So in whatever market we're working in, whatever consumer group we're working with, whatever theme we're working with, culture will change. And it's a really good idea to stay connected with that. Culture and change, in fact, is accelerating, particularly in areas associated and driven by the climate breakdown, particularly in areas around identity. Here's an example from beauty culture, for example. So, culture has changed dramatically around beauty culture in the last few years. We were at a time where we were all about anti-aging and plastic fantastic and being fearful of revealing our real ages. And then we moved into a time where beauty came from within and everyone was beautiful. And we had this world of sort of squad and community creation and brands like Glossier coming through and creating that. And then we moved into the emergent, where we're in the world of digital real crossovers and the avatar Lil Miquela that we see here. Devices and filters being much more important, seeing our bodies as ecosystems. This change happens whether we want it to or not, and it's been driven by all sorts of factors. Understanding it can make sure that you can not fall behind or stay relevant or even get ahead of culture and start to create and shape tomorrow's culture. So understanding the cultural context relevant to your question is really important, particularly as culture starts to change more quickly. So what does this cultural lens help you do? Well, first of all, it can, we've just broken this down into 4, just for simplicity's sake. The first thing it can help you do is sort of inspire your community with insights from the leading edge of culture and from stretch categories. So the categories which are perhaps culturally or semiotically a little bit more sophisticated than the category you're working in, where we see a flow down of influence from those categories into your category. Helping you go beyond sort of the immediate ideas, the immediate questions or activities, stimulating your community with some more stretchy, emerging or provocative insights. It's about considering something a little bit less well-trodden, you know, breathing some fresh energy into the community. And it's really good for galvanizing workshops. So if you're thinking about running a workshop to get some more challenging ideas to put into your communities and really supercharging that stimulus, this is a really good place to do an inspired piece of work. Sometimes, though, the question is really just saying, how do we really understand the cultural factors that are at play that are shaping what I'm hearing from my community today? And that might be the difference between 2 national cultures. It might be the difference between the culture around 2 demographic groups and why we're seeing slightly different responses. It might be simply a culture of travel, or a culture of eco-ness. And understanding that context helps you better really understand what you're hearing from your community and drawing out a deeper and richer understanding. It's the whys behind your community insight. Then we can anticipate. So what's next? What's coming down the track? What do we need to be aware of? How can we see that before our competitors can see it? Tap into the power of the Illume guides, along with our cultural analytics and expert cultural projection. They can help us see possible futures early so we can respond to them faster. This is how you future-proof your community. And then finally, you might want to really understand a little bit more about the brand that you're considering within this community, and perhaps the category that you're working on. And using semiotics, we can decode and reveal your brand's meanings and the role that it's playing in culture, and reveal to you perhaps the strengths of your brand that consumers find it hard to talk about or to see. That helps us then identify and explore your brand's untapped cultural potential, which we see a lot. And we can articulate that and then bring that to your community to ask them about some of those elements and get their responses and their creation on top of that. So those are the 4 sort of main modes that we have associated with bringing cultural insight to communities. Let's have a look at a couple of examples. So the first one really was a community where a global spirits client wanted to understand drinking occasions and how they could look at new drinking occasions. And for us, the question there that we could do in a complementary way was to ask, how can we unlock new, inspiring, stretchy drinking occasions and articulate those and bring those to the community? So what we did was to work with 6 Illume guides across various different countries to identify the emerging cultural shifts into these future drinking occasions. We work with stretch categories and perspectives to inform just some provocations on how the brand could then tap into those drinking occasions. And then we created some stimulus, which was put into the community to enrich and contextualize the community qual and provide also direct inputs to then go and test in quant. You know, this fueled the community with some more future-facing, more stretchy ideas and perspectives. And I think the net result was it brought more engagement and some more energy and newness to the community and richer results for that particular client who was really after that kind of stretch and provocation from the community. Another example is an Anticipate example. This was a global beauty client who has an ongoing community to help unlock new opportunities in travel retail and a fantastic relationship. Excuse me. We wanted to ask from a cultural perspective, how can we anticipate future consumer needs that we can't see today and future consumer expectations in this world, so that we can really bring those, backcast them into the community and really make sure that this was a very future facing output that we got from the community. So it needed a very future oriented approach. We defined the emerging cultural landscape around travel retail, and then got into clarifying the positive experiential cues and motivators of retail beauty, specifically in relation to a metaverse environment, as you can see from the image, because this was coming through in the cultural work as a really important dynamic that we needed to look directly in the eye and do something with. So the team built a series of culturally informed, really future-facing community research briefs, and then those went into both qual and quant, and it allowed a sort of much deeper interpretation and understanding of those community outputs in a much more future-focused way. This is a fantastic collaboration because we're now taking this integration of community work and cultural tracking of that community work to the next level by creating a kind of, I guess, a unique travel retail beauty ecosystem that combines ongoing cultural understanding and projection, emerging consumer needs, and the community exploration that supports that. So that's a really exciting collaboration around the Anticipate version of this. So how do we get to this cultural lens for your community? Well, firstly, the Space Doctors team would work with you to gain, and the Humanate team, to gain clarity on what the challenge looks like and how we can see this work enhancing the community program and drawing more value out of the community program. The idea here is 1 + 1 = 3, so that we get more value out of the total combination. And, you know, we'll talk through the best approach. It might be that it's one of the 4 that we've just been through, or perhaps a combination of those. You know, it might be, for example, you're interested in inspiring a particular community with some new ideas, and those ideas might come from unlocking some latent assets in the brand that we've identified from the brand decode. So that will be an inspire and unlock project. But, you know, it can be one or a combination of those. But the important thing is it's the best approach to enrich your community learnings and bring maximum value in 1 + 1 = 3. We then structure and agree the insight program with you to make sure we're doing that effectively and you're clear about how it's going to work. It will be a program of cultural projection, perhaps some brand and category analysis, some insights into stretch categories and popular and emerging culture, and then see if we want to build in some Illume Guide work which connects us with those cultural change makers. And then really beyond that, it's about making sure that as your community is set up, as it's run, as we start to get results out, that we are making sure the cultural lens is there too, alongside the really important consumer insight. And that helps us just bring the biggest value out. It's fresh perspectives to the community, anticipating and exploring emerging and future consumer needs and desires with the community, bringing a new lens to the interpretation of your findings and seeing if there's new ways of unlocking your brand's potential. And we'll be really clear about the impact this is having on your thinking and your decision making, and working with you to make sure that this work is activated and implemented in the organization. And just a note really, a couple of clients that we're working with at the moment are now on their 2nd and 3rd pulses of this new cultural approach in a longitudinal community that's going on for 6, 12, 18, 24 months. Clients making sure that we are continuing to refresh our cultural understanding alongside our community, because we know that context is shifting and changing over time. So when might you add this. When might you decide to deploy this cultural lens on your work? Well, as space doctors, we would say cultural work is always valuable. It brings you significant value in knowing how to differentiate, how your consumers may respond in the future to your brand or business, you know, giving you some certainty in a highly uncertain future, as our systems fragment and we have to change and adapt in response to climate breakdown. However, in the context of communities, there are some good prompts that might be these. Maybe use this approach or consider this approach if you're at a strategic crossroads. Maybe you're feeling stuck. Maybe ideas are stagnating a little bit. New innovations and brand executions are kind of flat in testing. Brands feeling like it's losing a bit of traction or a bit of energy. This is a good time to understand where your cultural relevance is and whether you need to reconnect with culture and re-understand your role in culture. Maybe you want to stretch the brand into new categories or into new markets. This is a good time to know how the cultural context will be different as you stretch across. Maybe you just have lots of insight and lots of information from your community and it's not quite all making sense. And the understanding of why is you know, this is happening is missing. Or you've got a lot of insight, or you feel the organization is perhaps a little bit disconnected from the what's next of where the culture is going. Or maybe you've got your own applications which are in your minds after hearing this today, and I'd love to talk to you about those. So, do these matter to you? Getting a sharper understanding of why consumers react as they do and how to change that. Accessing, stretching, and inspiring cultural inputs to energize your discussions and your workshops. Mastering cultural difference and how it plays out and avoiding those pitfalls of cultural misinterpretation. Staying aware of the accelerating cultural change, it can be a blind spot. Tracking your brand's relationship to culture, because cultural change may mean the meaning that consumers take from your brand is changing. And then identify early, before your competitors, the opportunities that are opening up in culture. If those things matter to you, then I think culture matters to you too. So I'd be really happy to talk.